Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our very first Plan First live broadcast. This is where we, as the Plan First experts, talk about different topics related to architecture, interior design, interior decorating, landscape design, quantity surveying, and engineering. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Nick Lico.
Hello, Sean.
Nick and I will be presenting today's talk. And today's talk is going to be about residential architectural trends globally and locally here in New Zealand. Every week we'll have a different topic and it will be live at 12:30 New Zealand time every Wednesday. So you as members of the public are free to listen in and type comments or questions that you may have, and Nick and I will answer them as best we can. So today we're going to talk about the residential trends featuring at the moment. And when we talk about trends, we're not just talking about what's fashionable at the moment. We're talking about what shifts there are in the way people live, and also what their challenges are and how design is responding to that. Firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Sean Larkin. I'm the Design Services Manager here at Plan First. I am an architect, South African registered, working towards my registration here in New Zealand. And I'd like Nick to introduce himself.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Lico. I have a 30-year history of working as a registered architect. I spent half of that in the commercial field, including half of that time in New York City. The other half of my more recent career is in residential architecture. And associated with that, I also operate a separate residential building company, which is part of a brand called Refresh Renovations.
All right, so today we're going to start by looking at global residential design trends. I will be talking a little bit about the global trends. And first and foremost, what is on everybody's lips at the moment is sustainability. So sustainable and net zero homes have actually become the norm, whereas in the past it was the exception rather than the rule. Now everybody is striving to actually have their operational energy reduced and also to work a lot more with renewable and recycled materials. Smaller and smarter homes are also very trendy at the moment. Spaces are being doubled up into multifunctional spaces. And one can quite easily do this with clever layouts and with smart storage. So, for instance, dining room tables can double up for kids to do their homework. It's easy to have a lot of people working from home at the moment, if not every day, then 2 or 3 days a week. And it's easy to just take a corner and do a home office instead of having a whole dedicated room just for a home office space. So with a bit of clever design, one can achieve a lot more. Thirdly, wellness, especially after COVID, I think a lot of people took a bit of a challenging mental health knock. So wellness design is very important, supporting health and well-being. So we do this through natural light, good ventilation, and visually connecting with greenery. We do this through indoor courtyards, or at least just connecting to the outside world via balconies or windows. Materials are also a lot warmer, woods, natural stone, and finishes that reduce toxins. So just to improve the overall well-being of the inhabitants of the space. Of course, prefabrication and modular housing. This is responding to the fact that housing has become almost unaffordable to a lot of people, more especially first-time homeowners. So customizable, high-performing and quick-to-assemble homes, which are fabricated in factories, reduces waste, it cuts timelines, and it offers better workmanship because it's produced under controlled environments. So often these can be just assembled in the factory, put on the back of a truck, transported to site, and within a couple of minutes or hours, you've got your home ready exactly where you want it. Technology and smart homes is also quite a big one. Everybody wants to reduce, well, they want their home as comfortable as possible, firstly, and they want to reduce their monthly expenses. So the home can really be controlled through AI-powered energy management, smart thermostats and lighting so that you're comfortable all year round without having to actually manually set anything. So your home actually becomes very responsive and user-friendly. And lastly, for global trends, we've got what we call soft minimalism. Now, minimalism has been around for quite some time, but we're moving away from the stark white walls and we're going for a warmer, softer approach. So we're using earth tones, textured materials, and curved forms just to create a more calming environment as opposed to the very stark white, rather harsh minimalism that we've had previously. And that, in a nutshell, talks about the global trends. So we could go into a lot more detail with each and every topic, but I think for the purposes of today's broadcast, we will just cap it at those two. Nick, before we go into your section, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, just the fact that the global versus the local conditions are very, very aligned, especially across the countries that we see those brands behind you on the wall in terms of refresh zones as examples in New Zealand, the UK, America, and Australia. The trends are pretty much identical. But I'll comment on one of them specifically that you alluded to.
All right, I'm going to be adding your presentation to the stage and I hand over to you.
Great, thank you. So Sian mentioned effectively, she spoke about one condition, and it's not just the aesthetic ones, and that's really the fact that we generally have a house affordability problem in the world. So how does that translate to what we're seeing with customers? Effectively, what we're seeing on a daily basis is there's a number of typologies that we're being approached as inquiries, and I'll just run through those very quickly. A very common one is garage conversions, and these are predominantly in housing areas and housing stock where the houses tend to be in neighbourhoods perhaps that are 20 years and older, and that also means then that they tend to be in some of the more higher value areas because on a concentric city basis they're closer to the CBD, whereas a lot of new homes in urban environments tend to sprawl out, as people know. So garage conversions, as an example, a lot of these older homes, as just for argument's sake, say built in the 1930s, cars were a more precious commodity in the sense that they tended to be put into a shelter. The paint quality wasn't as good. Often people now just leave their vehicles outside. So that's created an opportunity to convert garages into habitable spaces for extended families or growing families to move into. We're then seeing something that the government, and I think this is why they've mandated it, is they've become much more flexible on putting autonomous dwellings on existing properties in the form of some kind of prefab or a sleep out, and that's because ultimately the homeowner already owns the property with the land. And then the third one is quite an obvious one, which is extensions, whether you're extending outwards or upwards. So why are they asking for these? It's kind of interesting to see the diversity of household. In a number of cases, it's an increase in intergenerational living. We've always seen that historically in various cultures. We've even from when I started the building company about 13 years ago, we had customers from the Polynesian community who it's not unusual for them to have 3 generations, where the most elderly generation had bought the home initially. We're starting to see 2, if not 3 generations making similar inquiries, just out of the challenge of home non-affordability, and then that's the same with extensions, and we get a really wide spanning range, and it's a really enriched way to look at housing. We had a customer where two sisters approaching retirement sold their independent houses and then put those budgets towards their third sister's home, where they basically did a reasonably large extension, and then from there, that was effectively how they were going to enter their semi-retirement era.
Nick, there's a question that's come in that you can maybe answer.
Okay.
And the question is, are there particular materials or construction methods gaining momentum in New Zealand for environmental or cultural reasons?
I wouldn't say for cultural reasons we're seeing it on housing. To be honest, I can't think of actually, and we're effectively a very large volume provider that services the full spectrum of renovations as well as a number of new houses. I haven't seen a cultural facet applied to that. I'd be interested to know if there's a more specific component to that question. On the environmental front, yes, but the reality is that people interpret, I believe, environmental facets very closely with just what that provides in terms of comfort and savings. So it's not generally an aesthetic condition that you see as a consequence of that. It's probably things more likely that it's more efficient domestic hot water, better insulation, as even the government has mandated, so that houses have lower operational costs and are warmer, but they're not translating into an aesthetic look.
And getting back to the sleep outs, one of the other questions that we've got is, do you need consents for garages, sleep outs, or extensions?
That's a very good question. I'll keep that really brief. There's a lot more complexity to all 3 of those than what homeowners often consider, and if they if they get poor quality advice, they can end up in quite serious problems down the track on their projects. Without getting into all the technicalities, this is why our own process, inclusive of the Plan First group and our wider associated companies, have very clear methodologies in terms of the evaluations we do early for our customers and inquiries. That there's a lot of things that can transpire. I'll just give you one as an example on a garage. Garages, when they're built for the purpose of just housing a vehicle, the concrete slab is usually built in close proximity to the driveway or the adjacent lawn, if that's what it is next to. If you're actually going to make that a room to sleep in, the framed walls have to be a lot higher, and you have to literally build like a moat around the garage. If you're not aware of these things, they can be incredibly costly. And if you go down a methodology of consulting with a trade-based professional instead of an industry-based professional who understands these challenges, you could end up with some real problems in terms of cost and compliance.
All right. So what is the general consensus? If you're doing a sleep out, does it need to be a certain size before there's consent?
My suggestion is just to, within the times we've got, is to suggest that find an advocate that is experienced, so that they can come and advise you on the specifics for your particular home. And I'll give you one example. We find this with, I'll give you a clear example that I hear daily, where people go, I don't think it's a structural wall. So this is going into a house now, and they go, they want to be over optimistic, and the builder has said, yep, that's correct, it's not a structural wall. Pretty much every single time I come across that, no one has advised them that the wall has a bracing component. So by actually taking that wall out, even if it's not structural, they've compromised the structural integrity in a different manner. And the analogy there is, just because the government is saying you can build X amount of square meters without a building consent, that doesn't mean that the council's going to allow that size of property on your section. There's still going to be other planning restrictions. And in a worst case, a builder would go ahead and go, it meets the building consent requirements that we don't need one. They go and build a concrete slab, they build the structure, and then the council effectively becomes aware of it, and it's effectively classified as non-compliant, meaning you'd have to rebuild it.
Yes, so actually getting the right advice early on is key.
Paramount.
One of the other questions that has come in, and I'd like to answer this one myself and then get your opinion on it. What is one design decision most homeowners regret not thinking about early enough in the process? Now, in my experience, there's a couple of things. The biggest thing I would say is, I always recommend, if you're going to be building or adding onto your house over time, start with a master plan. Even if you are not going to build everything in phase one, know where you're going at the end of the day. Because I often find that people take a shotgun approach. They will build onto their house for what they need now, but then later on, when they want to do phase two, phase one is actually in the wrong place. And then they regret having built that, not having planned the entire thing and worked back from that. And secondly, not all stakeholders are on the same page. So often you'll find the husband wants one thing and that's important for him, and the wife wants something else and that's important for her. And they don't bring those two ideas together and have a good compromise before they move forward. So I think in my experience, those are the two things. But Nick, in your experiences, have you found?
Oh, 100%, exactly the same. And I think the most key point that I would only add off the back of that comment is you need a comprehensive master plan, because you need that to equally have a better understanding of costs. And there's nothing worse than just going straight into a project, not knowing what it's going to cost, and then by the end of it, in accordance with the government's independent statistics, renovations, as an example, end up on average 30% over what your expected price was, and you hear a lot worse, and that's just from poor planning and communication early on.
All right, so I'm just going to fire off these questions as they come in. Do you see outdoor living spaces or flexible layouts becoming more important in residential design here in New Zealand?
Would you like to answer that?
You go ahead, Nick.
Sure. Okay. I think I've spoken about this with a number of people I've known, from effectively my kind of generation, and talking even about our parents, how there's certainly a much bigger interest in people have a much bigger interest in their homes, and whether it's the inside of their house or their outdoor living, it's applicable to both. And again, I just point to that image behind you there, that there's effectively a Refresh brand you've got, which focuses on housing and renovations, and landscaping is actually separated out as a completely separate specialist called zones. That shows that there is a market and a demand for that kind of service.
I would like to add to that as well that I think over the last, I would say probably 20 years, outdoor living has become a lot more important, and the whole indoor-outdoor transition has become very important. And that also goes hand in hand with open plan living. Previously every room was compartmentalized and had a specific function, and indoor was indoor and outdoor was outdoor. So that has all meshed together over the last couple of years, and I think outdoor living spaces are seeing more and more importance, because New Zealand has got a culture of outdoor.
Yes, quite right. I've always found it interesting how you see this on movies, and it's been the case for generations, how everybody will have an image in their head if you ever mention like the United States, in terms of how people have these very large social barbecue and family events. If I think back like 40 years ago when I was a child, at least from my recollection, there wasn't as much social interaction in terms of outside of family groups, whereas now people are actually having people round to their houses to basically socialize at home. And there's lots of reasons which we don't have to cover off in this. We just see that trend, and that's what you're saying. Whether it's indoors or outdoors, and there's a crossover, they're interacting and socializing between spaces.
Another question that's come in, and I'm going to ask you to answer this one, Nick. What should I consider when choosing an architect or designer for my project?
Oh, I think we keep that pretty light. You've always got to have a good. You've got to have a good rapport between you both. That can be pretty hard to assess. I think checking in on customer testimonials is really important on that. It's like picking any professional, and everyone will have had experience in this field. It can be very difficult to actually determine if they're going to be the right fit. And so what are a couple of things that can help with that? Well, one is often customer testimonials. I mean, we obviously, as part of Plan First, see benefit in being associated with a larger network that we're growing, in that it's a modern form of an institution in some ways, which is very much about a customer-centric experience. And that's why I think we're seeing it across a lot of other professions and brands. Just give you a couple of examples, or two or three. Animates is pretty much the main go-to vet supplier in New Zealand, if I'm not wrong. We have Lumino, which is a dentist brand, and Specsavers. And those three brands would completely eclipse any of the independents. And I don't think that's necessarily just about bulk buying. I think that is actually about customers' expectations and customer experience, and effectively a safety net if something doesn't go to plan.
I also think if you've got a friend or somebody that's done a design project, and you can get a referral from them, if they've had a good experience with a designer, the chances are you'll have a good experience as well.
That's
so I
right.
think referrals are very important. If you are planning a project, ask around and see who your friends have used in the past and who they can recommend.
Yeah, agreed.
Nick, I'm just going through the questions. Would you like me to go back to your presentation and address the questions afterwards?
Sure. There's only one thing that one extra thing I was going to say. If Sean, can I go to the second slide? Just got one more. Can I maneuver to that?
You can go ahead, Nick.
Okay. Let's see if I can do that. Oh, right. I'm sorry. Do I have to?
You can use your arrows on your keyboard. That should work.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. No, not getting that. Sorry. That's okay. So what it is just a picture of a kitchen. I was going to mention at the start of the presentation that here's the hot pick for the session, and you can hold me to account if I get this wrong, but it's a prediction on a product that I think is going to become incredibly mainstream in the next 3 years in terms of interiors. And what that is effectively to start vinyl wrapping a whole lot of surfaces. So a very similar technology that's been around for a very long time with vinyl wraps for vehicles. We're seeing some terrific products on a global level that have been innovated, and the solutions are just outstanding. They are, because they can effectively manufacture a vinyl to look like any product they want. So they pretty much can span the look from stones to timbers to paint colors to textures. And I don't know how they do it, but they even manage to control the textural quality. So the timbers, for instance, even have a grain effect, and they just look amazing. And it means it gives you the versatility to even to completely cover over an existing room. And it's not just limited to kitchens. We've seen it in bathrooms where walls and even showers are overlaid with a vinyl.
So are those vinyl products waterproof?
That's correct. It's it's waterproof. If you're going to overlay it in a shower, you're ultimately, what you're relying on there is that you already have a waterproof substrate in
Hmm.
place.
Okay.
If it was within the shower, so it's completely suitable in that environment. But you can definitely use it in the remainder of the bathroom. One of the things I really like it for is definitely for cabinets where people want a solution and they maybe don't want to completely rebuild the kitchen. Something I am really keen to try is actually using some very entry level white melamine joinery, and then actually designing it with these kinds of products and then costing that up. It would just be a phenomenally customized solution. No different to the way we see cars that have some pretty outstanding artwork.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Nick, a couple of questions coming through. This is an interesting question. For homeowners on a budget, where's the smartest place to invest first? Kitchen, insulation, windows, or layout?
It's a fair. Do you want me to answer? Do you want to go or?
You go first, and then I'll add in.
I think it is definitely project specific, just like the sleep out we spoke about. Once we basically visit a home and listen to the homeowner, we can actually then give some feedback. We're very candid practice, meaning two very quick examples. In many years back, I visited homes in an area before house prices became so non-affordable, and I'm thinking of a particularly kind of affordable area at that time. Renovations cost the same price wherever you build, and so unfortunately it was cost prohibitive to extend, and we'd often recommend maybe it's a better idea to sell and to buy a house in a different neighborhood. And people are very appreciative of the honesty and the openness in the feedback. And so just like you said about glazing and heating, this one bewilders people. For example, so I sometimes think I get a little bit of trouble for this, but it's not. I don't believe it's the case. It's not true that you actually have to double glaze your house, just like the structural beam. In our own house, we have a north-facing kitchen, and we actually get all the advantage of that being single glazed by the fact that it means in winter it actually attracts more heat gains. And then it doesn't matter that it effectively has a heat loss at night because we're not actually effectively sitting in that room. So there's a lot more complexity to planning and design than sometimes is kind of considered.
Yeah, I think it is project specific, and I also think if you look at the specific house and the family that's living there, what is their biggest priority? If they need an extra bedroom, let's say, but they can't afford to do an extension, then layout would be the most important thing for them.
Yes.
And you would carve out another bedroom somehow within their existing footprint.
I agree.
If the house is freezing cold in winter, then insulation would be the most important thing. So it very much depends on each and every project. I don't think there's a blanket solution.
No, you're right, and I think a good consultant, will in fact actually advise you potentially much wider spanning as a trusted consultant should. One that I just regularly bring up when I visit homes is effectively heating. I think of one particular project where I was brought in they wanted to do an outdoor living area, and they had a newborn, and I raised the concept of central heating, and they were really appreciative of it. They hadn't actually been told that they were just using portable heaters. And just a sort of a comment on that about a consultant versus a proprietary company. By proprietary, I mean companies that ultimately promote their commodity, and it's understandable. If you're going to ring a couple, I'm just going to give a couple examples. If you ring someone about carpets, if they promote if they promote wool, they'll tell you all the benefits of wool. If they're promoting nylons, they're going to tell you that their product is better for the same factors. And we see the same with double glazing is a very good thing, but effectively insulating a house is no different to if you basically put more insulation on your fridge. If you don't actually plug the fridge in, it's not gonna stay cold. So the other way around, you could completely insulate your home, but if the thermal modeling hasn't been done on what are the consequences then in terms of heating or cooling, it could go terribly bad.
All right, our next question we've got is, when renovating, what design choices make the biggest difference in how a home feels, not just how it looks?
I think just same, I guess, as to the last question, really. I think it's on a case-by-case basis. I don't agree with comments that we often hear from TV shows and renovation shows, for example, where they're promoting things like you should always renovate the kitchen and the bathroom. I'll give you a first-hand example. My very first home that I owned, which was a home that was suitable to a first home buyer living by myself, and effectively the person who then bought it off me through the agent was in a similar situation. It was their first home, and I had renovated everything except the kitchen. And according to theoretical advice that you hear, I should have renovated the kitchen. The fact that the kitchen was unrenovated was one of the appealing elements to that home buyer, because they could then come in and basically make it theirs.
Yes, that's a good point.
Exactly.
Another interesting question. If you were designing a new home today, what would you prioritize to make sure it's still relevant in 20 years' time?
One thing we see that we've been getting astronomical amount of work on is that a lot of new houses do not have a purpose-built laundry compared to old houses. They'll have a very big double garage, and they will then have the plumbing done as part of the base build so that the homeowner can connect their washing machine and plug in the dryer, but there isn't all the other superfluous items that people actually want for their laundry. So all of a sudden, they buy the house and it's like, oh, well, there's actually nowhere to put the laundry basket.
Yes.
After they buy a 300 plus square meter house. That's a very particular detail. I think the 20 years, just a comment on that, brand new houses, there'll be some quite good data on this. I think it's a little bit like car ownership. People who tend to be attracted to new houses, it tends to be also in newer neighborhoods. They're the neighborhoods where ultimately also very familiar often struggle to keep up with infrastructure, including things like schools.
Mm.
And I don't have this data. This is a subjective view, but I think they tend to be more transient to their home. Now I've got a really good friend who is effectively within 5 years sold his brand new home, and they've just in recent months moved into a second new home. So I don't think those houses, people are looking to future-proof them for 20 years. No different to someone buying a car. They're not thinking about, what is that car? Is that going to serve me some purpose 20 years from now? There'd be some really good stats out on this. You know, those of us that are old enough that look at cars on the road, I think every day when I look around and I go, I can't see cars, some cars that I remember from even 10 years ago
Mm.
on the road.
I think it also very much depends on where the house is located.
Correct.
And I'll give you an example. In South Africa, for instance, where I come from, electricity is a major problem. So in South Africa, virtually everybody has solar power and they have batteries to store electricity.
Yes.
That is a big trend in South Africa. But here in New Zealand, where there isn't a problem with electricity, solar is not really too much of a consideration, I wouldn't say. But if you do look at the global trends, I would probably say something more along the lines of making your home a smart home so that it does regulate your power consumption. Those types of things would be relevant today in, if I can say, future-proofing your home as best you can, because innovation happens every day. So what is relevant today is not going to necessarily be relevant in 10 or 20 years' time.
That's really good. That's a good one. I never thought of that. In fact, yeah, you're right. Quite difficult with new homes if that's not thought through in terms of running.
It's difficult to add things later on as a retrofit.
Yes.
So I believe it should be designed into the home when you are doing the design.
Clever.
So let's have a look if there are any more questions that have come through for us.
Okay.
We haven't covered.
I was wondering where you were getting the questions from earlier, and then I discovered the comments column.
Okay, this is one for you, Nick. What are you noticing about how Kiwi homeowners want their homes to feel? Are we moving towards more simplicity or still after luxury? Bit of both, maybe.
Yeah, they were still building some pretty big houses. If we look at the group home build market and some of the new suburbs, you know, there's obviously interesting what you were saying before about outdoor living. That one of the ways that developers are ultimately managing affordability is by having smaller lots of land and actually taking up more site coverage. So kind of interesting actually on that principle, that whereas older suburbs, you know, we talk in New Zealand about the historic quarter acre, and then it effectively there were smaller modules of that, but everyone had a relatively decent outdoor yard. So that's I hadn't thought of that until when you mentioned the question. In one respect, it's not become a norm. It's actually almost like it's an added luxury to a new property. So if affordability is more paramount, you people know these places. You might just have enough room to meet minimum building codes and just have an outdoor clothesline.
I think one of the biggest concerns in the world at the moment is the unaffordability of housing. And I think that's why the tiny homes have become so popular over time. You know, that is another discussion in itself.
Yeah, this is. I mean, this will be is a bit possibly a little controversial. I think the legislation, in particular at a local government level, is well intended by the fact that there is a mandate towards allowing more medium and higher density developments. From my own bias on that, I think what we're seeing a lot of is a lot of first home. There's obviously a demand for first homes. Again, in an urban area, a lot of those first homes tend to be smaller households, one or two people dwellings. And so once those entry-level house prices have exceeded affordability, that's why we're seeing, I think, a lot of these tiny homes, which are actually tiny townhouses, replace that demographic.
Yes. Let's have a look if there's anything else that we haven't covered.
I lose you all. I'll remember this for next time. I'm not hanging up in case my battery dies on you. I thought I'd better mention that. Apologies if it did. I think I should be all right.
All right.
That's one of the ways to assess if we're talking too much.
Okay, I think last question and then we can wrap it up. How can homeowners keep their design choices timeless while still embracing current trends? So I would like to start off by saying, in my opinion, I don't think one necessarily needs to make everything in your house trendy. Try and keep, I don't want to call it a neutral palette necessarily, but for the purposes of the discussion, I'm going to call it a neutral palette. And then you can add elements of trendy aesthetics, which are easy and not too expensive to change later on when those become outdated. Because the last thing that you want to do is every 5 years have to take out a chunk of money to keep your home relevant in the market.
Interesting. Yeah, that is a really good question. I really like this one, and just if anyone wanted to have a look as an example, on the Plan First website, there's a wide range of the projects we've built in the last decade available there for people to take a look at. And the reason I'm mentioning that is that we don't have an aesthetic, and we absolutely love doing, for example, we like words like modern, as you mentioned. We like words like classic, and we can do classic and modern in either a character old house or the other way around. Really good design effectively follows the pathway that the homeowner basically directs us to once we get a better feel for them. And I think it's funny how I've gotten much more interested in car designs through this most recent, for that reason, that I've become much more appreciative of how the branding effectively works for different cars. And I think another session, we could actually do a really good session, I think, on an analogy of other commodities in terms of how they basically reflect customer expectations in their own commodities.
Yes. All right, Nick, I think there's nothing else from my side on the topic today. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, thanks for inviting me along.
All right, so then we'll close off today's session. I just want to remind everyone that as of next week, we will be live at 12:30 every Wednesday, New Zealand time. And we look forward to discussing different topics every week and listening to your questions or answering your questions. So feel free to join us.
Thanks, Sean.
For joining us, and we'll see you guys all next week.
Take care. Bye. See ya.